Decoding Lost Language of Pre-Deluvian Civilizations. It began with an artifact pulled from the silt of a drowned plateau off the coast of the Arabian Sea, an unassuming stone tablet, scarcely larger than a man's hand, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to hum with an intelligence older than time itself. Marine archaeologists had been mapping a series of ruins long suspected to belong to an Ice Age shoreline settlement, but none expected to find what appeared to be a written language. The tablet's discovery rippled through the academic world like the tremor of an approaching quake. Carbon residues suggested it was at least 12,000 years old, centuries older than the earliest Sumerian pictographs, and yet its geometry, the deliberate incisions and patterned syntax, implied a mind both ordered and expressive. Some whispered the unthinkable, that this could be the linguistic fossil of a civilization that flourished before the flood. For decades, the notion of pre-Deluvian civilizations had lingered at the edges of archaeology, confined to myth and speculation. The stories of Atlantis, the tales of Ziusudra, Utnapishtim, and Noah. These had long been regarded as moral allegories, not chronicles of geological cataclysm. But here, at last, lay an object that refused dismissal. Its texture bore the marks of tools, sharper than obsidian, its inscription carved with a steadiness that defied the crude randomness of proto-writing. It was as if someone from an epoch lost beneath the oceans had reached forward through the millennia, leaving behind a message written in a tongue that no living human could understand. The artifact was transported to a laboratory in Muscat for preservation, then to a linguistics institute in Vienna for examination. Infrared microscopy revealed traces of pigments within the grooves, faint residues of iron oxide and malachite that hinted the symbols had once been vividly colored, perhaps illuminated for ritual or didactic purpose. Yet the real shock came when digital overlays exposed recurring structural ratios. Each cluster of glyphs obeyed a rhythm of 3 to 5 repeating strokes, suggestive of phonetic cadence rather than pictorial meaning. To the astonishment of the researchers, it seemed to be writing with grammar. Dr. Lena Mara, the project's lead semiotician, described her first encounter with the tablet as standing on the shore of an older world and hearing its tide call my name. In her notes, she wrote, "Every line, every curl is purposeful. It feels spoken, as though the script itself vibrates with sound. I can almost hear it. What she could not have known was that her intuition was closer to truth than anyone dared imagine." Within months, rumors began to spread among the linguistic community that the tablet shared statistical affinities with no fewer than 6 known language families: Sumerian, Elamite, Dravidian, Proto-Indo-European, even archaic Polynesian root structures. This impossible convergence ignited fierce debate. Could such a correlation arise from coincidence? Or did all these tongues descend from a single forgotten ancestor? If so, then the language of Eden, long dismissed as biblical fancy, might have been a real historical phenomenon, an language spoken before the rising seas drowned the coasts of the Pleistocene world. The mainstream establishment bristled. Reputations were at stake. Textbooks had long declared writing a product of the urban revolution, emerging around 3200 BCE in Mesopotamia. A script predating that by thousands of years threatened to upend the entire chronology of civilization. Funding was quietly withdrawn from the research team. Conferences declined to host their presentations, yet the story could not be contained. Independent journalists, mythologists, and alternative historians seized upon the discovery as vindication of their long-held theories about lost high cultures. The phrase pre-Deluvian script began trending across scientific forums and social media alike, fusing scholarly intrigue with apocalyptic wonder. As word spread, other expeditions returned to the drowned plains of the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean trenches, and the gulfs of Southeast Asia, regions once forming the fertile lowlands of the late Ice Age world. Everywhere, whispers arose of carved stones bearing similar motifs, spirals within triangles, intersecting chevrons, a serpentine symbol that reappeared with mathematical precision. Could it be a shared symbolic code of an interconnected maritime culture, an antediluvian network whose language had once encircled the globe? To understand the gravity of this possibility, one must recall the cataclysm that ended the Pleistocene around 9,600 BCE. Geological cores show that in the span of a single millennium, ice sheets collapsed, oceans surged more than 100 meters, and entire continental shelves vanished beneath the waves. Myths from every corner of the world echo the same event, a great deluge that annihilated an age of gods and heroes. Perhaps those gods were nothing divine, but the remnants of an advanced culture swept away by climatic fury, their knowledge drowned along with their cities. The tablet, then, would be not merely a relic, but a voice, the final echo of a world erased by water. In Vienna, the team began compiling a digital corpus of the symbols, each traced, indexed, and compared against databases of known scripts. Machine learning algorithms mapped patterns invisible to the human eye. One particular arrangement, 3 nested crescents punctuated by a vertical dash, appeared repeatedly at the beginning of sequences, leading researchers to suspect it functioned as a determinative, perhaps denoting divinity or cosmic order. Another motif, a mirrored pair of zigzags, seemed to mark the boundaries of narrative phrases, much like quotation marks. Slowly, painstakingly, the team constructed a proto-lexicon of 43 symbols. They called the system Anu, after a root word extracted from a recurring sequence that appeared to signify sky or origin. Meanwhile, the media seized on the mythic implications. Documentaries spoke breathlessly of Atlantis reborn. Fringe theorists linked the find to Lemuria, Mu, and the vanished builders of Göbekli Tepe. Yet amid the noise, a quiet seriousness persisted among those who handled the stone itself. To them, the artifact was not a prop for sensationalism, but a sacred text, a communion with ancestors who had known the stars by names we have forgotten. Late at night, under the sterile hum of laboratory lights, Dr. Mara would run her fingers across the engravings and feel an inexplicable warmth, as though the stone remembered the touch of its makers. The first public unveiling took place at the International Congress of Archaeolinguistics. As the lights dimmed and a projection of the tablet filled the screen, an audible gasp passed through the hall. The symbols, magnified and rendered in spectral contrast, seemed almost alive, organic curves entwined with geometric rigor. Dr. Mara spoke softly. "We are looking," she said, "at the earliest attempt of humanity to speak across eternity." Her voice trembled with awe, not certainty. If these inscriptions truly predate known writing, then everything, our timelines, our assumptions of progress, must be reconsidered. Civilization, it appears, did not begin in Sumer. It began wherever this language was first spoken. That evening, as rain swept across the city, news outlets broadcast images of the tablet under headlines proclaiming "the language before history." Universities scrambled to reassess their curricula. Religious leaders offered divergent interpretations, some hailing it as proof of a forgotten covenant, others denouncing it as heresy. And beyond the noise, a few visionaries sensed that humanity was standing on the threshold of a profound rediscovery, that the prehistoric silence was about to break, and the voices of the ancients would once again be heard. For the scientists, this was not mythic romanticism, but data. Sequences on the tablet matched astronomical patterns corresponding to precessional cycles, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, implying a culture with precise celestial knowledge. The tablet's creators had mapped the stars as they were more than 12 millennia ago, long before the rise of recorded astronomy. Whoever carved those symbols understood the sky not as scattered points of light, but as a living text, a reflection of divine syntax mirrored on Earth. Thus, the first whisper of the forgotten language entered the modern world. Scholars argued, skeptics protested, believers rejoiced, but the stone remained silent, its meaning locked within a cipher older than myth. Yet, for those who listened closely, there was already a resonance, a sense that beneath the static of time, the words of an age before the flood were stirring once more, ready to speak. And when they did, humanity would not merely learn new history. It would remember an ancient one it had long since forgotten. The quest to decode the mysterious pre-Deluvian script began not in laboratories, but in the restless dreams of those who had gazed upon its symbols. To the untrained eye, the glyphs seemed ornamental, abstract swirls and nested geometries reminiscent of both serpent coils and stellar orbits. But to linguists, they whispered a secret structure, a rhythm of repetition and divergence that hinted at syntax. As the months progressed, the project shifted from cautious analysis to obsession. Teams from across the world, armed with quantum resolution scanners and linguistic AI models, joined the Vienna group in pursuit of the first decipherable word of this primeval tongue. At first, progress was excruciatingly slow. Traditional comparative linguistics failed. There were no obvious cognates, no grammatical parallels that aligned cleanly with known families. Each glyph appeared contextually fluid, assuming different semantic roles depending on its placement within a cluster. This polymorphism defied the rules of linear writing systems. It was closer to a living geometry, an architecture of meaning. When analysts plotted the symbol frequencies into spectral maps, they discovered fractal recurrences, suggesting that the script encoded not only phonetic or lexical content, but also a mathematical language underlying its structure. The deeper they probed, the more the line blurred between language, art, and algorithm. Dr. Lena Mara found herself haunted by the glyph they had tentatively labeled Anu-Ra, a trifold spiral flanked by dots forming a triangular constellation. It appeared in every known specimen of the script, sometimes inverted, sometimes encircled, yet always at the heart of its inscriptions. At dawn, she would dream of it as a rotating sun, spinning upon itself and drawing her into its luminous core. In her waking hours, she began to suspect that Anu-Ra represented more than a word. It was a concept, perhaps even the foundation of the language's worldview. It is both sound and silence, she wrote in her field notes, an invocation of creation itself. The turning point came unexpectedly, through the integration of computational phonology. By feeding the glyph sequences into a neural reconstruction engine originally developed for extinct human dialects, the team attempted to simulate possible phonemic outputs. The algorithm, given no base language, returned waveforms that bore strange harmonic qualities, tones that resonated across multiple frequency bands, producing standing waves in the acoustic chamber. When played aloud, the sound filled the lab with an eerie vibration, like wind across a stone flute. Instruments recorded measurable electromagnetic fluctuations as though the sound carried an intrinsic pattern of energy. "We may have just heard the voice of prehistory," one of the physicists murmured, "and it still moves the air." Encouraged by this, Dr. Mara sought to decode the semantics of these sounds. A breakthrough arrived through pattern matching against astronomical alignments. One inscription contained 28 repeating glyphs, alternating with crescents, possibly representing lunar phases. The same configuration reappeared in cave markings found in the submerged caves of southern Spain. when cross-referenced with lunar calendars from Göbekli Tepe and Lascaux. The alignment corresponded precisely to a synodic month from around 10,500 BCE. Suddenly, the abstract became temporal. The language had a calendar, a rhythm of celestial time. This discovery hinted that the people who wrote in Aku Anu had not only a linguistic system, but also a scientific framework grounded in astronomical observation. As researchers compared more fragments, a pattern emerged that suggested an early form of dual coding, visual and auditory layers coexisting within the same symbol. Each glyph could represent both a phoneme and an idea, depending on the orientation or the stroke thickness. It was a kind of multidimensional communication, vastly more efficient than any modern writing system. Some proposed that Aku Anu might even have functioned as a proto-programming language, a linguistic interface between human thought and natural resonance. If true, this civilization had not only written their words, but tuned them to vibrational principles that affected matter itself. This notion would later ignite furious debates between physicists and philologists, but for now, it merely deepened the team's wonder. Among the most striking revelations was the presence of what appeared to be syntactic recursion, a self-referential structure allowing complex clauses to nest within one another. This level of linguistic sophistication suggested not mere communication, but philosophy, narrative, and abstraction. When translated symbolically, one of the repeating sequences rendered as "the water rises, the light remembers." Though tentative, it hinted at mythic or prophetic content, possibly an account of the great deluge itself. Yet even this fragment spoke of perception, the idea that light, memory, and water were interlinked in their cosmology. Each word seemed a reflection of both physical and metaphysical reality, collapsing the divide between science and spirituality. The process of decipherment became a modern odyssey. Across universities in Japan, India, and Egypt, specialists compared notes, arguing over each interpretation. Some insisted that the script showed affinities with Proto-Dravidian word stems for sky, seed, and knowledge. Others saw echoes of ancient Andean quipus, the knotted chords that encoded information through spatial relationships rather than phonetics. The possibility arose that the pre-Diluvian script might represent a universal system of knowledge, adaptable to multiple cultures that once shared a common ancestral wisdom before the rising seas scattered them across continents. Meanwhile, fieldwork intensified. New underwater sites yielded fragments of inscriptions carved into basalt pillars, arranged in circular formations that appeared ceremonial. Each structure was oriented toward a specific celestial coordinate, often aligning with the precessional positions of Vega or Sirius, stars of immense mythological importance across later civilizations. The correlation was too consistent to be coincidence. Whoever composed these texts had charted the heavens with precision rivaling that of classical astronomers. The symbols were not random decorations, but an intentional mapping between language and the cosmos. The decoding process also revealed something profoundly humbling. This ancient language seemed less concerned with ownership of ideas and more with continuity. Rather than singular authorship, inscriptions referred to collective consciousness, phrases translating roughly as "we remember as one" or "the many voice of one thought." Such expressions hinted at a society that valued unity of perception, where knowledge was shared, not possessed. In this light, Aku Anu became more than a linguistic mystery. It was a philosophical testament to humanity's forgotten capacity for harmony. One particular discovery electrified the team. A stone disc recovered from the Sundalen shelf bore an inscription that, when transliterated, contained a recurring triad of glyphs resembling Anu-Ra. Beneath them ran a band of wave-like lines, intersected by small triangular marks. When superimposed onto a mathematical model, these corresponded precisely to the sine wave representation of sound harmonics. In effect, the ancients had encoded the physics of resonance into their writing, a literal fusion of word and vibration. For Dr. Mara, it was the confirmation of her intuition. The script was alive. Its purpose was not to document history, but to generate it through sound, rhythm, and geometry. As translations multiplied, faint narratives began to emerge. Some texts spoke of a vast island of knowledge where the first voices gathered to name the stars. Others described a covenant between the children of clay and the keepers of fire, suggesting a mythic dialogue between mortals and gods, or perhaps between different branches of early humanity. The line between myth and memory blurred, and scholars found themselves asking unsettling questions. Were these merely metaphors, or had the writers of Ak-Anu witnessed real cosmic or geological events? Did they record the fall of their world as both history and hymn? The academic backlash grew as sensational headlines flooded the media. Government agencies, wary of nationalistic claims over submerged territories, imposed restrictions on further dives. But the data had already escaped into the digital ether. Open-source researchers and linguistic hobbyists began running their own pattern analyses, feeding the corpus into decentralized AI systems. The results were startlingly consistent. Independent algorithms reconstructed fragments of coherent syntax that seemed to repeat across distant sites separated by oceans. The implication was staggering. Aku-Anu might have been the lingua franca of a global maritime civilization that predated all known cultures. By now, Dr. Mara and her team were working in near secrecy, shielded from both academic hostility and media frenzy. Late into the night, they would whisper the reconstructed words aloud, testing their resonance against ancient acoustic models. Sometimes the air itself seemed to respond, low frequencies reverberating through the stone walls as if the language retained power over its surroundings. Whether this was coincidence, psychoacoustic illusion, or something deeper, no one could say. But every experiment reinforced their conviction. This was not merely the echo of a language, it was the echo of consciousness itself. As Section 2 closes, the scholars stand at the threshold of revelation. They have cracked fragments of a script older than recorded time, glimpsed the architecture of a civilization that measured its words in harmonics and starlight. Yet they know they are still only scratching the surface. The true meaning lies buried in the next step, the realization that these inscriptions may not just describe the flood, but foretell it, embedding warnings in a code that waited 12,000 years to be heard again. When the first fragments of the decoded Ak-Anu language began to yield coherent translations, the implications were nothing short of astonishing. Humanity was no longer staring into the void of prehistory, but peering through a linguistic window into a civilization that had mastered both nature and the mind. The words and symbols, once dismissed as the ornamental musings of a primitive culture, now revealed the outlines of a world startlingly sophisticated, one that balanced advanced science with profound spiritual insight. The texts spoke of cities aligned with the stars, not in metaphor, but in measurable geometry. They described dwellings built along harmonic ratios, with foundations tuned to the frequencies of the Earth's magnetic field, acoustic modeling of certain recovered chambers, underwater sanctuaries now buried beneath layers of coral and silt, suggested resonance properties that could amplify human voice frequencies by factors of 20 or more. To the modern ear, this sounded like early acoustical engineering, yet the ancients seemed to have viewed it as sacred. The voice of the people becomes the voice of the world, read one transliterated line. Through vibration, the living stone answers. The deeper the translations went, the more the boundary between technology and ritual dissolved. The Akanu texts referred to tools of light and sound, described as beacons that drew energy from the sky's breath. Archaeologists, cross-referencing these with artifacts found at sites like Yonaguni and Dwarka, began to suspect that these might have been early devices for solar concentration or magnetic induction. Concepts far beyond the metallurgy and mechanics known to the Neolithic world, yet in the language of the ancients, they were described not as inventions, but as remembered gifts, knowledge inherited from a time before separation, when sky and sea spoke the same tongue. Among the most compelling discoveries were the so-called Songs of the Builders, fragments of verse inscribed around temple entrances. Each stanza was composed in alternating spirals, readable both inward and outward, a dual narrative of creation and dissolution. The translations described vast construction projects guided by celestial observation. We raised the pillars to follow the rising of the white star. We cast our shadows at noon to measure the life of the world. To modern astronomers, the white star corresponded perfectly with the precessional rising of Vega around 10,500 BCE, the very epoch of the Ice Age's end. These builders were astronomer-engineers, calibrating architecture to the heavens. What emerged from this growing corpus was not a scattered mythos, but an integrated worldview, one that unified astronomy, geometry, language, and morality into a single framework. The civilization behind Aku Anu did not compartmentalize knowledge. Its science was its religion, and its language was the bridge between the seen and unseen. Their writing was filled with recurring triads: sky, water, light, memory, form, breath, body, voice, spirit. Each triad represented the unity of physical, intellectual, and spiritual domains, suggesting that they perceived existence itself as harmonic resonance. This was not superstition, but a coherent metaphysical system, expressed through a language that encoded balance as both principle and practice. Archaeological reconstructions supported these insights. Submerged foundations revealed polygonal stonework that defied simple tool marks, interlocking blocks shaped with laser-like precision. Yet beneath their mathematical perfection, the stones bore an unmistakable artistry, engraved with fractal motifs of spirals, serpents, and waves, symbols of motion and transformation. One recovered mural depicted a figure standing within a circle of concentric rings, holding what appeared to be a rod or tuning fork, surrounded by glyphs for vibration, seed, and fire. It seemed to illustrate the generation of energy through sound. In that single image, science, spirituality, and myth converged. As the translations multiplied, so did the glimpses into the rhythms of daily life. The Aku Anu texts spoke of agricultural calendars dictated not by seasons, but by stellar cycles. Farmers sowed crops when the eye of the serpent rose in the east, a reference scholars later associated with the constellation Draco. They cultivated terraces that followed the flow of water, channeling irrigation through stone-cut spirals that prevented erosion and maintained moisture balance. Theirs was an ecological intelligence born of observation, one that modern sustainability theorists found astonishingly advanced. In their worldview, humanity was not the master of nature, but its custodian, the hand that remembers the soil. Philosophically, their writings displayed a serene fatalism coupled with immense optimism. The ancients believed that time was cyclical, not linear, and that civilizations rose and fell in correspondence with celestial patterns. As the stars turn, so too the ages turn, one passage read. We are the echoes of those before us, and the seeds of those to come. This cyclical cosmology bore uncanny resemblance to later Hindu Yuga doctrine and the Mesoamerican concept of world ages. Yet the Akanu texts predated both by millennia, suggesting that these myths may indeed have originated from a common ancestral narrative, dispersed after the Great Deluge. In one especially poignant inscription, translated after months of work, the ancient authors described their own awareness of impending catastrophe. The sky trembles, the waters hunger, the fire beneath remembers. Whether this referred to tectonic upheaval, cometary impact, or climatic collapse, it reflected a collective consciousness anticipating disaster. Yet their tone was not fearful but resigned, even reverent. We speak so that we do not vanish. It was clear that the creation of the language itself had been their response to destruction, a last act of defiance against oblivion. In recording their knowledge, they were preserving the very essence of being human: communication. Even more haunting were the children of the deep, mentioned repeatedly across the corpus. These were described as survivors who journeyed to distant lands after the flood, carrying fragments of the sacred tongue. Later myths across the world, of the Apkallu in Mesopotamia, the seven sages of India, the Viracocha of the Andes, and the Oans of the sea, all echoed this motif. Could these cultural memories stem from the same root? If so, then Akanu was the matrix from which the mythic heroes of all early civilizations emerged. The custodians of memory who seeded language and wisdom anew after the deluge. For modern readers of these translations, the realization was chilling. We were not discovering their language. We were remembering it. Linguistic analysis revealed that many ancient root syllables, an, ra, kai, persisted in multiple families worldwide, often carrying similar meanings of sky, earth, light, and life. It was as if fragments of Ak-Anu had survived subconsciously, woven into the very DNA of human speech. The idea that our words themselves are the fossilized echoes of an antediluvian tongue reshaped the way scholars viewed language evolution. The division between linguistics and anthropology crumbled, giving way to a new interdisciplinary field, some dubbed archaeolinguistic cosmology. In the laboratories, holographic simulations reconstructed possible scenes of Ak-Anu life. Amphitheaters carved from limestone where priests or scientists, there was no difference between the two, intoned harmonic chants that mapped cosmic patterns in sound. Workshops where artisans sculpted crystalline forms to amplify resonance. Gardens irrigated by channels engraved with equations resembling Fibonacci sequences. Every reconstruction blurred the boundary between myth and engineering. In their world, art was function and science was beauty. The impact on contemporary thought was seismic. Philosophers revisited the idea of logos, the creative word, as not just metaphor but literal power. Physicists noted the parallels between Ak-Anu's vibrational theories and modern string theory, both positing that the universe itself arises from oscillation. Linguists, meanwhile, began to see syntax as more than structure. It was rhythm, the same principle that binds atoms, cells, and galaxies. The ancients, it seemed, had not separated language from existence. To speak was to shape reality. And yet, amid all the grandeur, there were tender glimpses of humanity. Some inscriptions recorded poems of love and mourning, voices calling across the abyss of time. "I wait where the rivers meet," one fragment read, "where your voice fell into the sea." Another, translated from a shattered obelisk, implored, "When the stars return to this place, may you remember our names." These verses bore witness not just to civilization, but to emotion, to the enduring ache of connection across ages. It was as if the ancients had anticipated our discovery, composing not only for their descendants, but for us, the future listeners who would one day rediscover their words. As the corpus expanded, researchers began to see a unifying vision emerge. Ak-Anu was not simply a linguistic code. It was a mirror of a lost consciousness, one that perceived all things as interwoven threads of the same cosmic fabric. Their temples were observatories, their scripts were equations, their myths were algorithms of meaning. They lived as though every word they spoke was sacred, every sound a ripple in the greater harmony of existence. And perhaps, in their eyes, it was. Thus, through the painstaking decoding of stone and symbol, the world of the pre-Deluvian peoples began to rise again, not as fantasy or legend, but as memory awakening from deep geological sleep. Their language, once silenced by the flood, spoke again across time. And though only fragments had been translated, one truth shone clearly through them. These ancients had not vanished. They had left instructions for remembering. The flood myths of antiquity, whether those of Utnapishtim, Noah, or Deucalion, had always been treated as metaphors for moral renewal. Yet within the Aquanu inscriptions, the deluge emerged not as allegory but as eyewitness record. Every symbol, every refrain of rising waters and darkened sun now appeared to describe a genuine cataclysm. The texts did not speak of divine punishment, but of celestial mechanics, of planetary imbalance, of a chain reaction between earth and sky that unraveled an age of harmony. For the first time, humanity was reading the apocalypse through the eyes of those who lived it. Decoded passages painted a haunting picture. The breath of the sky turned to fire. The pillars of ice cracked. The sea devoured the mountains. Geologists who examined the descriptions were stunned by their correspondence with known events from the Younger Dryas, an abrupt climate reversal around 12,900 years ago that had plunged the world into chaos. The Akanu scribes described auroras that bore swords of flame across the night, and stars that fell and sang. To modern scientists, these phrases hinted at cometary impacts and atmospheric plasma storms. The writers had witnessed Earth convulsing as the heavens burned. The texts also revealed a pattern of foreknowledge. Long before the final cataclysm, astronomer priests had recorded irregularities in the motions of certain stars. They spoke of the wandering light that broke its circle, a celestial object whose orbit defied their predictions. The glyphs for this anomaly, a tilted ellipse intersecting a serpent, appeared repeatedly, suggesting it was the harbinger of destruction. Whether this referred to a comet, an asteroid, or a massive solar outburst, the ancients believed it to be part of a cosmic cycle. The sky remembers its wounds, one inscription read, and the earth answers. Catastrophe to them was not random but rhythmic, the pulse of the universe cleansing itself. At the heart of their response lay the code, an attempt to preserve their knowledge against extinction. The Aquanu language itself became a vessel of survival, designed not merely to record information, but to endure cataclysm. Its structure, mathematical, harmonic, recursive, was intended to outlast speech, culture, and even memory. Hidden within its grammar were numerical patterns corresponding to precessional cycles, lunar months, and solar harmonics. Each glyph was both a word and an equation. This was why the symbols felt alive. They were built to resonate with the fundamental laws of the cosmos. To read Akanu was to read the universe. When the floods began, the surviving chronicles became increasingly urgent. Lines curved into spirals, as if the writers had tried to condense more meaning into less space before time ran out. "We build the vessels of thought," one fragment declared, "for the sea shall take the land, but the word shall not drown." Another, inscribed around the base of a submerged monolith, read, "If you find this, know that we spoke to you. Know that we remembered." These were not prayers, they were transmissions encoded for a distant future they could scarcely imagine. And yet, through the millennia, their words had reached us. Excavations at the Bay of Cambay revealed massive stone causeways leading into the depths, lined with tablets engraved in Aquanu. Some bore repeated glyphs arranged like musical notation. When transcribed into frequency ratios, they corresponded to harmonic intervals used in ancient tuning systems thousands of years later. The ancients had embedded their message not only in language, but in sound, a universal constant impervious to translation. Their hope, it seemed, was that even if humanity forgot their words, it might still feel their resonance. Sound, after all, transcends culture. It vibrates through time. Dr. Mara's team reconstructed one such harmonic message using digital synthesis. The result was a low, oscillating tone that evoked both sorrow and serenity. When the sound was played through subsonic amplifiers, water in nearby containers formed geometric patterns, hexagons, spirals, concentric rings, matching the very motifs carved into the stones. The ancients had known cymatics, the interplay of vibration and matter. They had encoded their memory in frequency itself. They didn't just write about the flood, Dr. Mara whispered. They sang to us across it. But there was something darker hidden within the code. Some sequences carried warnings, mathematical forecasts of cyclical destruction. One tablet from the submerged Sunda shelf translated to, "When the axis turns once more, the waters will hunger again." The text included a ratio that, when converted to astronomical time, corresponded to a 26,000-year precessional period. To the ancients, cataclysm was inevitable, governed by cosmic rhythm. Yet, they believed that survival depended on remembrance. Those who retained the language could anticipate the signs and prepare. The flood, then, was both an ending and an initiation, a forced renewal of humanity's covenant with the cosmos. The final chapters of the Ak-Anu corpus read like elegies. "We watched the mountains weep," one line laments. "The sky fell into the sea, and the sea rose into the stars." The writers recorded their own extinction with stoic grace, embedding instructions for rebirth amid lamentation. When the silence comes, keep the pattern. When the darkness comes, keep the word. In those lines, linguists discerned not despair, but devotion, a faith that knowledge encoded correctly could transcend even the death of worlds. Archaeologists trace the dispersal of survivors through genetic and linguistic clues. The same root words, Anu, Kai, Ur, Ra, appeared in the earliest Sumerian, Egyptian, and pre-Vedic vocabularies. Migration maps suggested waves of refugees moving westward into Mesopotamia, eastward into Southeast Asia, and southward toward Africa. Each carried fragments of the old code, simplified and adapted to new tongues. Myths of skyborn teachers, serpent gods, and culture bringers, Enki, Thoth, Quetzalcoatl, might all be the dim echoes of Aquanu sages preserving the lost syntax of the world before the flood. In time, even memory turned to legend. The harmonic science of the ancients became mythic music. Their astronomical precision became the lore of gods. Yet, the code endured, scattered across languages, carved into megaliths, woven into sacred chants. Every culture that followed carried a spark of Aquanu within it, unaware that its prayers, songs, and alphabets were fragments of an ancient encryption. The ancients had succeeded. They had hidden eternity in language. For modern humanity, the rediscovery of the Ak-Anu corpus was not merely archaeological but existential. The more the code was decoded, the more its philosophy began to echo contemporary science. Its cosmology of cycles paralleled astrophysical models of orbital resonance. Its harmonic principles mirrored quantum vibration and frequency theory. Even its moral vision, balance through resonance, found echoes in ecology and systems theory. It was as if the ancients had articulated the foundation of a unified science long before our age divided knowledge into disciplines. And yet, the warning remained. Every decoded passage that spoke of wisdom also carried a shadow, the inevitability of collapse. When the memory fails, one tablet warned, the circle begins anew. Scholars argued whether this was prophecy or philosophy, but Dr. Mara saw it as both. They weren't predicting disaster, she wrote in her final field report. They were describing entropy, the cosmic tendency toward forgetting. Civilization dies not from flood or fire, but from amnesia. The message was unmistakable. The cataclysm that drowned their world was not only physical, but symbolic, a warning that knowledge unremembered is knowledge lost. In preserving their code, the ancients were offering humanity a mirror, a reminder that every age faces its flood, whether of water, time, or ignorance. The only ark that endures is the one built from words. As the research reached its climax, the Vienna Institute prepared to release its findings to the world. On the eve of publication, Dr. Mara recorded a statement for the archives. Her voice, soft yet steady, captured the weight of 12 millennia. They knew this would happen, she said. They knew the flood would come again, not of water, but of forgetfulness. They left their language as a bridge across the ages. Now that we have crossed it, the question is not whether we can understand them, but whether we can remember ourselves. Outside, a storm rolled across the European plain, thunder echoing like drums of ancient ceremony. In that moment, it seemed as though the voices of the Akanu were speaking again, warning and guiding all at once. Their code had survived the waters, the centuries, the silence. It now stood revealed, a message carved in the bones of the earth itself. And within it lay both prophecy and possibility, the end of one world and the key to beginning another. The revelation of the Akyanu language did not simply fill a gap in archaeology, it tore open the chronological fabric of human history. Once the final fragments were decoded, everything we thought we knew about the origin of civilization began to unravel. The Sumerians, long celebrated as the first bearers of writing, suddenly appeared as heirs to a far older tradition. Egypt, the Indus Valley, even early China, all seemed to carry echoes of the same ancestral code, refracted through the prism of millennia. It was as though the flood had not destroyed humanity's beginnings, but buried them under layers of forgetful time. At the core of the emerging narrative was an unsettling idea. Humanity's story was cyclical, not linear. Civilizations rose, reached enlightenment, and fell into oblivion, only to rise again, guided by faint memories encoded in myth and language. The ancients had not seen themselves as the first people, but as the remembered ones, a continuation of even older epochs lost before their own. "We are the dream of the dream before," one inscription declared. "The sea erases, but the stars write again." Such words reframed human history not as progress, but as repetition, a vast spiral of rediscovery. As scholars pieced together the philosophical core of Akanu, a new worldview emerged. The ancients saw existence as an interplay of vibration and consciousness, a universe born not of matter, but of resonance. Language to them was the tuning fork of creation. Every word uttered, every symbol inscribed was a harmonic act, aligning human thought with cosmic law. To speak truthfully was to maintain balance. To speak falsely was to distort the frequencies of reality itself. The moral codes of later religions, the sanctity of the word, the creative power of speech, now seemed to echo this primordial science. "In the beginning was the Word," proclaimed later scripture, unaware that the ancients had said the same thousands of years earlier in the stone song of Ak-Anu. This understanding reshaped the meaning of technology. The ancients' machines were not engines of metal, but harmonies of geometry, sound, and intention. Their science was participatory. It required consciousness to activate. Mind is the current. Form is the vessel, one decoded passage read. To modern physicists, this sounded uncannily like descriptions of quantum entanglement or observer-based reality. The ancients had fused physics with philosophy, engineering with spirituality. They did not build to dominate nature, they built to converse with it. The implications reverberated far beyond academia. In laboratories across the world, researchers began experimenting with sound-modulated fields, inspired by the harmonic ratios found in the Archaeological code. Architects applied its principles of resonance to acoustically self-stabilizing structures. Linguists and neuroscientists explored the cognitive effects of phonemes reconstructed from the ancient tongue, noting measurable changes in brainwave patterns and emotional coherence. It seemed the ancients had known that sound could heal, that language itself could alter the human state of being. Modern medicine, for all its precision, had forgotten that simple truth. Meanwhile, the historical record began to shift. Underwater mapping revealed that many megalithic sites, from the Bimini Road to the ruins off Yonaguni, from India's Gulf of Kambat to the submerged city of Heraklion, formed a global pattern of alignments echoing the Ak-Anu cosmogram. These were not isolated anomalies. They were the surviving outposts of a single cultural network, a world once united by a common language of stone and star. The flood had scattered its people, but their design grammar persisted in the pyramids of Giza, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, and the stepped temples of the Andes. The blueprint of pre-Deluvian civilization lay hidden in plain sight, misunderstood as coincidence. The philosophical impact was even deeper. Humanity, long convinced of its modern uniqueness, now stood humbled before its ancestors. The ancients had not worshipped gods apart from nature. They dialogued with the cosmos, understanding divinity as the rhythm of existence itself. In their worldview, the sacred was not elsewhere. It was embedded in structure, proportion, and word. Their gods were symbols of natural forces personified for memory's sake. The sun as the source of breath, the moon as keeper of tides, the serpent as the spiral of energy moving through all life. Religion, in their sense, was a mnemonic science of balance. As the Ak-Anu translations reached the public, reactions ranged from awe to fear. Some hailed it as the dawn of a new synthesis between science and spirituality. Others condemned it as heresy, a threat to the linear model of human progress. Governments, wary of destabilizing narratives, sought to suppress the more controversial findings. But the code could not be buried again. The language had reawakened, and with it came an instinctive recognition that its wisdom belonged to everyone, not to institutions. The word is the inheritance of all who can hear. One final tablet proclaimed, "No crown may own the sound of the earth." Scholars began reinterpreting ancient myths through the lens of the rediscovered tongue. The Tower of Babel, once seen as a tale of divine punishment, now appeared as cultural memory of Ak-Anu's fragmentation, the moment when the unified language of harmony splintered into the many tongues of post-deluge humanity. Likewise, the Sumerian myth of Enki teaching humans to write and measure time might preserve the memory of survivors transmitting fragments of the code to early Mesopotamia. Even Plato's Atlantis dialogue gained new weight. Its description of a lost island civilization destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune now echoed the geological evidence of sudden sea level rise and cosmic impact. Myth was no longer fantasy. It was history in symbolic disguise. For the first time, human prehistory looked like a palimpsest. Beneath the visible layer of recorded civilization lay an erased foundation, faint but recoverable. This realization forced a profound reckoning. If the ancients had achieved such balance and understanding only to lose it, what did that imply about us? Were we too walking the same cyclical path toward collapse? The warnings within Ak-Anu grew more haunting in this light. When the memory fades, the tablets cautioned, the flood returns. The flood, in this age, might not be of water, but of dissonance, technological noise, environmental decay, spiritual amnesia. The past was not merely a mirror, it was a prophecy. Dr. Lina Mara, reflecting on her decades of research, wrote in her final paper, "We are the post-deluge children they dreamed of. They built their words to outlive water, and they have succeeded. The only question that remains is whether we can live up to their remembrance." Her words captured the paradox of the discovery. The ancients had died to preserve memory, and we, their descendants, were tasked with remembering them. For the first time in modern history, science and myth agreed on one point, that humanity's survival depends not on invention, but on recollection. In the years that followed, interdisciplinary academies devoted to Ak-Anu philosophy began to emerge. Their curricula combined archaeology with acoustics, linguistics with astrophysics, meditation with mathematics. Students learned to read the glyphs not as dead symbols, but as living frequencies. Chanting reconstructed phrases, they claimed, induced states of heightened perception and empathy. Skeptics dismissed it as pseudoscience, yet the data, brainwave synchronization, heart rate coherence, and measurable field harmonics were difficult to ignore. Slowly, humanity was beginning to rediscover the science of sacredness. Meanwhile, a quiet cultural revolution unfolded. Artists, musicians, and architects drew inspiration from Ak-Anu geometry. Cathedrals of sound replaced temples of stone. Music became once again a form of worship, tuned to planetary resonance rather than commercial rhythm. Cities began experimenting with structures designed on harmonic ratios, producing less noise pollution and greater well-being. The forgotten synthesis of art, science, and spirit was returning just as the ancients had intended. Their legacy was not buried. It had been waiting. Yet the ultimate meaning of Ak-Anu transcended all reconstruction. It reminded humanity of its continuity, that we are not the apex of civilization, but one note in an endless symphony. The ancients had tried to preserve harmony through knowledge. We, inheriting their code, faced the same challenge in a new form. The flood still lingered on the horizon, not in the oceans, but in our dissonant minds. "Remember the rhythm," the tablets implored. "When you forget, the sea within you rises." Perhaps that was the final lesson of the pre-Deluvian sages, that the greatest catastrophe is not external but internal. Forgetting the language of harmony means forgetting who we are. Remembering it means hearing again the cosmic music that once guided our ancestors. And so, across universities, monasteries, and research labs, a new generation began to listen to the wind, to the stars, and to the ancient whisper beneath their own heartbeat. The lost language was speaking again, and humanity, for the first time in millennia, was beginning to answer. In the wake of the discovery, a quiet revolution began, one that unfolded not in laboratories or lecture halls, but in sound. Across the world, individuals drawn by some indefinable calling began to experiment with the reconstructed syllables of AQANU. What had begun as a purely linguistic curiosity soon revealed something profound. When spoken aloud in sequence, the words produced sensations of warmth, vibration, and lucidity. It was as if the language itself remembered being alive. Dr. Lina Mara was the first to notice the phenomenon. During a late-night recording session, she pronounced a reconstructed triad of glyphs: Anu-Ra-Ki, believed to mean sky-light earth. The tones reverberated strangely in the acoustic chamber, producing harmonic interference patterns visible in the surrounding water tanks. For a moment, she felt an almost electrical tingling through her fingertips. "It's like the sound wants to organize matter," she wrote in her notebook, "as if the air itself were aligning to the memory of creation." What began as scientific notation became invocation. Others who repeated the phrase reported similar effects: heightened awareness, inexplicable calm, a sense of expansion. The ancient tongue seemed to bypass comprehension and speak directly to the nervous system. Soon, laboratories confirmed what intuition already suspected. Acoustic resonance scans showed that certain AQ-ANU phonemes corresponded to natural frequencies within the human cranial cavity. The ancients, it appeared, had engineered their language to harmonize the speaker's physiology with the environment. To speak was to tune oneself to the planet. This was the long-lost secret of Logos, the word that shaped worlds. "We thought language evolved for communication," Dr. Mara told a symposium. But perhaps communication was only its side effect. The real purpose of language may have been coherence. In monasteries, sound researchers, and meditation schools, the rediscovered syllables became mantras. Chanting groups formed spontaneously, not out of religion, but resonance. Recordings of Akanu phonetics circulated across streaming platforms. Listeners described visions of luminous patterns, dreams of ancient architecture bathed in blue light. Governments could not regulate what was, technically, a set of vowels and consonants, but beneath the surface, something far older than policy was stirring. Humanity was beginning to remember how to speak with intention. Meanwhile, archaeologists uncovered new evidence that the ancients had anticipated this reawakening. In a cavern beneath the ice fields of Greenland, a sealed chamber held a single crystal sphere engraved with Akanu glyphs. When laser light passed through it, the inscriptions projected spiraling symbols onto the walls, mathematical harmonics describing planetary resonance patterns for the current epoch. One inscription, now famous, translated to, "When the stars return to their former song, the tongue will return to the living." Astronomers confirmed that the celestial alignments referenced matched our own age almost precisely. The message had been waiting 12,000 years for us to find it. This realization transformed the research community. No longer was Akanu merely a dead language to be catalogued. It became a bridge between epochs. Linguists, physicists, mystics, and musicians began to collaborate, fusing their disciplines into what they called resonant archaeology, the study of how vibration carries knowledge across time. They found that the proportions used in Akuanu architecture mirrored harmonic intervals in music, and that those same ratios governed orbital mechanics. The ancients had understood what modern science was only rediscovering, that reality is structured by frequency, and that consciousness can modulate that frequency through sound. Cultural movements blossomed around this principle. Music, art, and architecture shifted toward the harmonic ratios of the old code. Entire orchestras tuned themselves not to the modern A440 standard, but to frequencies derived from the Akanu constants. Listeners described feelings of clarity and connection absent in conventional music. Cities began to experiment with resonance-based design. Curved halls and stone facades engineered to distribute ambient sound according to golden mean geometry. In these spaces, one's own footsteps created soft chords, and whispers carried effortlessly through air thick with balance. The world itself was beginning to hum again. Yet beneath the wonder lay a sober understanding. The ancients had warned that language could heal or destroy depending on the speaker's consciousness. When the word forgets its meaning, one tablet cautioned, the sound becomes a weapon. History had proven them right. Every misuse of technology, every dissonant ideology was a form of corrupted language. The revival of Akanu carried the same danger. Its power to unify could equally magnify discord. Thus arose the discipline of linguistic ethics, teaching that the true pronunciation of the ancient tongue required not perfection of accent, but purity of intention. Without balance, resonance decayed into noise. Dr. Mara spent her later years documenting this rebirth. Her final expedition took her to the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple. There, among the ringed pillars etched with animals and celestial symbols, she noticed carvings resembling Aquanu motifs, spirals within triangles, serpentine lines entwined around suns. She realized these were not mere decorations, but phonetic diagrams, designed to channel sound into form. Standing between the pillars, she softly recited the reconstructed hymn of origins. From silence came the tone. From tone, the word. From word, the world. Her voice resonated through the stone, and for an instant she heard an answering echo, low, ancient, impossibly human. It was as if the builders themselves had spoken back through the architecture. She wept. Not from fear, but recognition. The circle was closing. The tongue had returned to the world that once gave it breath. In the years following her death, her recordings spread across continents. Scientists confirmed that certain harmonics within her final chant matched the Schumann resonances of Earth's electromagnetic field. For the first time, language and planet vibrated in unison. Humanity, after thousands of years of silence, had rejoined the cosmic conversation. Today, the Akanu script adorns museums, universities, and digital archives, but its truest form lives in sound. Children in schools chant its basic tones as part of linguistic heritage programs. Musicians blend its scales with modern instrumentation, creating compositions that seem both futuristic and primordial. Even skeptics admit that something intangible shifts in the air when those syllables are sung, an almost biological memory awakening. We may never fully know what the ancients intended, but we can feel what they meant. And perhaps that is the final revelation. The return of the ancient tongue is not merely the recovery of knowledge, it is the restoration of relationship between humanity and the cosmos, between sound and silence, between word and world. The ancients believed that every age would forget and every age would remember. We are the remembering. As night falls on our modern world, its cities glowing like constellations reborn, the air itself carries faint echoes of that first speech. They drift through concert halls, temples, and quiet rooms where researchers listen to the pulse beneath language. The forgotten syllables rise again. Anuraki, Anuraki. Sky, light, earth. The same invocation spoken before the flood, spoken now again after it, and in the spaces between the sounds, one can almost hear the ancients smile. For their message has crossed the waters of time, and their words, once drowned, now breathe once more.